Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's webinar. We have a very exciting session in store for you. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time, and not just because of the extra training that I've needed to be doing, as some of you may have seen. Today's session is called Medical Muscle. It's about building the strength and the flexibility, both, that medical requires to lead pharma's future. In my opinion, and I will happily say this to a partisan audience, the medical affairs department is gaining strength, and so it should be. I believe that in many ways, medical affairs should be leading in a large section of our organizations going forward. But we're doing so perhaps haphazardly at the moment. We understand that the medical affairs department, you could argue it's the brain or one of the brains of our industry. But now, as the scientific mandate becomes stronger, as the authenticity, as data, as the patient perspective, as technology all come to the fore, the importance of a strong medical department has never been higher. But it doesn't just mean we add sporadically. It doesn't just mean that medical leaders keep adding to their workload, or at least it shouldn't do. What we want to do, what we really want to do, is to find out how we can ensure that operationally we're able to cope and still do the things that medical affairs is supposed to do, i.e. drive the scientific conversation, drive the relationships that we have with medical professionals, and improve the standard of care for patients all over the place. So you're in the right place if these are also things that you yourself care about. And I'm so delighted that it's not just me talking today. I'm going to introduce you to a few of my panelists in just a second. But before I do that, I can see that a few of you have already discovered the chat window, which is great. You've clearly been to one of my webinars before. Introduce yourself. We don't want this to be a one-way conversation. We want this to be a discussion. This is important that it is democratized, this conversation. So introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, tell us what you in particular might be grappling with or what you're interested to hear about today. I want to see hundreds of messages in the chat window today. Let's make it a conversation, as I say. Just realized my video's off. Turn it on. That's a good idea. You can all see me now, I hope. Yes, I'm here and present. Apologies for that. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually get one of our poll questions going immediately, even before I've introduced our panel. So if you look at your screen now, you should see something appear in just a few seconds. Zoom seems to be a little slow these days, but it will appear on your screen. You can see it's a three-part question, and it's designed to just give us an idea of where we are today, what we believe in today. So I'll let you guys answer those three multiple choice questions while I'm introducing the panel. Okay, so that's me, that's your host. I obviously don't like this slide at all. My team insist on it, but there you go, that's me. More importantly, we have some fantastic panelists. Now, Samin is someone who I've wanted to have on a webinar for years at this point, and I'm really pleased that she's been able to join us. She's joined GSK not so long ago, and she's a VP of Early Medical Pipeline in Specialty Care. She's also, in my opinion, an incredibly refreshing and honest voice, a very open-minded person in general, and someone who I just think brings a dose of reality to all medical conversations. Really, really pleased to have you here. You've obviously got experience, of course, across HEOR, real-world evidence, clinical development, country leadership. So yeah, perfect. Thank you so much for being here, Samin. Really appreciate it. Sebastian, another person who I had a conversation with pre-pandemic, and ever since then I've wanted him to join one of my webinars. It is finally that moment, actually between roles as we speak. So up until very recently was at Vertex, where he was Vice President for Global Medical Strategy. He's a physician executive, 20 years of leadership across R&D. And previous to that has been at other major companies. Very excited to see where his career leads next. He hasn't informed me, but I believe it's going to be starting very soon. Avashni gets a special prize for today because she actually stepped in at the last minute. We had a speaker drop out, doesn't happen very often, but Avashni got a call at midnight last night and was able to step in at short notice. Huge thanks to her for shuffling her agenda around. And you may not be familiar with a Veritas, but Avashni was a senior leader at Grunenthal and has now stepped as the leadership for the US position, which is Veritas. And previous to that was holding some very senior roles at Novartis. In my opinion, one of the kindest and most authentic people that we have in our industry. So glad that you could join us, Avashni. I have no doubt that you'll contribute a lot to this conversation. And we have Denise, who is President of Medical at Amplity. And if you don't know Amplity, well, you should. These guys are, well, you'll hear a few words from Denise later, but in my opinion, these guys are trailblazers on multiple aspects. The one that we're going to be focusing on today is how we indeed scale up and ensure that flexibility as we build. Denise herself has been a leader in clinical and medical areas. She understands strategy and outsourcing. She understands patient support, more than 30 years in pharma and biotech, and obviously a champion for best-in-class science and biotech. So Denise, absolutely fantastic that you can be with us today. And a special thanks to your team as well for helping behind the scenes to make sure today's session became a reality. Okay, I can see roughly 2/3 of you have managed to sign that poll. I'm going to hold it open for another minute, so make sure you do answer if you haven't already. There are NA options if you don't feel like the question is directed at you personally, so choose that. And I can see that not everybody has introduced themselves in the chat yet, so please introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't done already. Now, one final thing before we get the conversation going, and I will say that a quick disclaimer, all of our speakers speaking from their own personal perspective, not necessarily that of their companies. But you might remember that you actually answered a question when you signed up for today's webinar. So why don't we have a look at the results of that? Question 1 was, what do you believe is the smartest way to build medical affairs teams, MSLs, today? So what do these percentages represent? Well, number 1 place was hybrid. Roughly even mix of internal and outsourced. Now, maybe you expected that to be number 1. Who knows? I actually expected it to be a higher proportion than what it is, only just over a quarter. 26%, the next one, have an in-house focus with some outsourced support, so primarily in-house. Prioritize in-house, full-time hires, another roughly a quarter of everybody. And then slightly less on this one, no idea. And then finally, mostly outsourced, so only 5% choosing the outsourced option. Okay, interesting. Oh, fully outsourced. Missed that one. Very small number. So there you go. Let's have a look at question number 2. What's the biggest barrier your organization faces when trying to scale medical teams quickly? So what are you actually facing? Let's have a look. Headcount restrictions despite increased demand. We all have to do more, don't we? How familiar is that? Anyone doing 6 jobs out there? Yeah. You're not alone, unfortunately. So the next one, NA, not part of a pharma company. The one after that, finding specialized talent with the right expertise. Just over a quarter of people choosing that one. Slow and resource intensive onboarding being the choice for nearly 8% of you. Navigating complex compliance and approval, 7% of you, and 5% lack of awareness of alternative staffing models. Okay, so we're here, I think, to satisfy a need. There's clearly a need of some of that awareness that we've just spoken about there that you can see, and that's what we're here to do. Right, I can see a few more people have answered the poll that I've set, so let's just end that and share the results. And if I could possibly ask my panel at this point to turn on their cameras and make sure that everyone realizes that it really isn't just me. Today's session is being recorded. You don't need to ask me for it. It will be sent out to you. And look at those happy smiling faces. That's beautiful to see. Thank you so much, panel. Okay, I'm going to share the results and get rid of my slides. And yeah, panel, have a look at these poll results. So first one, 65% of people saying leading integrated strategy alongside commercial. Now, that one I did expect perhaps to be in the lead, but not 2/3. 2/3 of the vote. By the way, I know I'm evil. I know that you want to tick every single box on these polls. I know that you do. And I know that it's terrible that I force you to only allow one. But I think it helps show where our priorities are. So 65% there, and then just smaller numbers on everything else. Second question, where do you personally spend most of your time today? Operational delivery, and nearly a third of votes going in on that one. Well, I think that's quite telling, isn't it? Where should we be? Maybe that's a different question. Okay. And the final part, which of these statements best reflects your mindset on thinking how medical should be scaled up? Actively looking for smarter ways to scale medical? Well, you are in the right place. That's a quarter of the vote. A third of the vote says, I'm open to new approaches, but I need internal buy-in. Fair enough, fair enough. And a quarter of us are just curious, just here for the ride. Well, you are very welcome to be here for the ride. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Panel, over to you. Let's get the conversation going. As I said earlier, let's make sure it's not a one-way conversation. Please feel free to answer the questions yourself in the chat. What is the challenge here? Why do we need to gain this muscle? Firstly, what is the sort of driving force behind all of this in your perspective? And why is it so difficult to do so properly? You can see from the poll results there is demand of how we do it. But what is the driving force there in the first place? Who wants to go first on that?
I'm happy to speak
Go first.
from my techno gym, which
Yes,
I've had
beautiful
specially
background.
made. Do you like it? Yeah, so it's a good question. I think, you've alluded to some of the reasons in your opening speech, right? Things are changing in the environment, but also how pharma has to engage with the environment. And I remember 18 years ago when I first joined the industry, medical role was very much around compliance and making sure that, the materials that we were generating were of the right caliber, and we were also the ones that went out and had the relationships with experts. But as the environment's gotten tougher, it's more the science has gotten more complex, the medicines are getting more complex, healthcare systems are getting more complex, but also tech has come in and changed the game quite a lot too. I think it's not just anymore around marketing. Well, the traditional way that we market, the go-to-market models have changed. And as you said earlier, people are looking for credible discussions on the science and the disease. They're looking for information, but information that they can digest and understand and use to help them inform practice and get better outcomes. And I think all of those things have meant that the way that we communicate and what we communicate has changed. And therefore, looking at the capabilities you have in house, what are those capabilities we need? And therefore, having a strong strategic medical affairs function, for me, that sits beautifully in that group to sort of help drive that conversation around what it is we need to be saying, how do we say it, what's the evidence we need to generate to say it, and make sure that we're generating that credible platform. So
And
that's
why is it so difficult? I mean, if I can just stick with you for a moment longer, because
yeah.
that's the slightly harder part of the question, isn't it?
Sorry, say that again.
Why is it so difficult? Why is it so difficult to
Make
make
it
all the
happen.
things happen that you've just expressed?
So I think, there's a few things. I am seeing some change happening, but it's not at the scale that McKinsey would like, given their various vision papers and various other vision papers. And I think it comes down to a few factors. I think there's a legacy mindset. So, not just within medical, but I think organizationally. So, you could have a really bright, proactive, dynamic medical leader who can see the value that the department or the capabilities can bring, but there may not be the organizational readiness. And there's still the kind of legacy mindset around traditional ways of operating. So, you come up against that. I think there's also legacy mindset within medical themselves. And I often find that when you're trying to kind of build this new way of operating and the capabilities and the strategic mindset and thinking about the end in mind and then using that to plan much earlier around your evidence packages, that's not always there either. I think there's a lot of people still in role who have been in the industry, for a number of years still, that change curve is taking a bit of time. So I would say that those two things are probably quite big areas that are holding us back. I thought it was interesting in the poll that capabilities, trying to kind of find people with the right skills. is a challenge. And I think that's part of the reason why you've still got this sort of legacy mindset occurring.
Okay,
I'm
so
sure there's more
no,
things, but
no, that is a
those are two
perfect
big
start.
things for me.
Perfect start. So who else wants to jump in on this?
Uh, Absolutely. Well, maybe just to add something quickly, because I agree with everything. And, there's a couple of things. One is I think that medical affairs, I like what Samin said about sometimes you may have the visionary leader or the proactive leader or the strategic leader, and sometimes right in the organization maybe it's not ready, or there are antibodies, or there are other priorities, or there are limited resources and certain things need to get done, right? All that is part of reality. So I think that if I take a step back and being very pragmatic, I think that medical affairs leadership, but certainly along the full continuum of talent, needs to become a little more comfortable with the paradox, right, of leadership and the duality. It's right an or, right, of being and I know we're not implying that, but being strategic at the expense of, right, or we spend too much time on the operational part, right, versus being able to be in other places. The reality is that you don't become muscle without operational excellence, without knowing how to get things done and do it well and back to basics. And by the way, I'm pushing a little bit the boundary on this also to complement, right? Because I fully agree with everything is being said, and I tend to be myself a little bit more on that inspirational, aspirational, strategic leadership. So I'm pushing myself a little bit to say that that element of operational excellence is absolutely critical, and sometimes from the business perspective, maybe it's not seen as such. Yes, good things are done, right? But I'm talking about the not just the what, but the how things are done, and then that limits some of the influence that medical can have. So what I'm trying to say is that there has to be that good management of the duality of the leadership and management, operations and strategy, understanding the criticality of getting things done that are part of the machine, while at the same time, right, being strategic, pushing into the bigger conversations. To me, one element is that I really think that the medical affairs need to become both synonym of intelligence and influence. And in intelligence, I don't mean just the brain or the intelligence and the smarts, right? I'm talking about the foresight, right? I'm talking about a lot of what we are looking from a strategic perspective. And sometimes it's not seen as such in a leading capacity. And the same with influence. It's the ability to get things done, how to get it, how to communicate it. So maybe I just wanted to add that, right? That muscle requires talent in medical, managing well that duality, being both operational excellent and strategic excellent, and understanding that what is expected from us is to be both influential and have the foresight, right, to inform the business.
I'm glad you used the word influence there, Sebastian. I find that it's sometimes a word that we're afraid of, particularly in medical, and particularly obviously externally, but even internally, we're afraid of that word.
I agree.
Vashni, I really want to hear your perspective, but also I think you are the person on this panel with the most experience also on the commercial side of our business, where of course the scaling up has been something that those departments are used to, and they've adopted many a flexible method. So just want to obviously have you answer the question, but also if you can bring in a little bit of your commercial comparison.
Thank you, Paul. And I think the perspectives so far are they're wide, right? And I think there's some very interesting pieces around how we can influence from a medical perspective and grow. Perhaps I'll also just take a step back. I love the words brain and muscle, right? You are the brain and you are the muscle. And it's about how we, our intrinsic bias, and maybe here I bring in my marketing background as well, because the brain part suggests the intelligence. The muscle part suggests almost like blue collar, right? It's the things that I work. If I'm just thinking about the analogies that we make. And it's interesting because our brains function like that. It's about where we think we should put our energies versus where we think our energies are not that important to direct. And why this matters is thinking about why do people also get into medical affairs? Why do they enter the medical realm? Do they think it's because of this incredible work which gets done, and it's amazing work that happens by a medical team to set up the science behind the assets that we have in hand? But what does it mean to transition from just the science into, and I love the word influence, Sebastian, right? Because the influence is taking the science and actually doing the muscle part of the work with the science. Are people, the folks that start in medical, is that a fundamental understanding when they enter medical that the realm or the scope of the work that they're going to do is not just a brain function work, but also a muscle function work, right? How do I generate the science versus how do I disseminate? And disseminate will be through influence, through channel, through a whole lot of different things. Like nowadays, you are developing omni-channel strategies, not just for your marketing folks, but for your medical folks as well. And is that connection actually being made for when you enter a medical phase? So this, I think, is critical for us to understand. And I love the idea of how do we scale medical. I think it also starts with who are we actually recruiting in medical? And are the people that we're bringing into the organization, do they have the mind space and the understanding of what is the scope of the function that we're actually talking about? And I think to your question around about how do organizations see it as well, I saw quite a few comments around, is my organization ready for it? Is my organization going to lean into this? I think that for me felt very much answered by one of the questions where you said such a high level of people saying you need to work on the integrated strategy, right? The medical head needs to work on the integrated strategy, because I think without us overtly calling it, what folks are recognizing is that you have to work towards business objectives, hence the integrated, right, focusing on the integrated strategy. Because if you think it's just purely about generating the science, but not integrating that into how the business objectives are being driven forward, you are going to end up being sidelined in an organization, right? Because of that. So I think that it speaks to the kind of people that we bring into the organization. Now, to your second question about how do we scale, how do we learn from other parts of the organization on scaling? And perhaps this is a thought for us to think about. How do we, one way forward is thinking about how do you buy in expertise? How do you build expertise, right? Because even if we are building a field force, an example, you'll ask yourself, what do I buy in? What do I promote from within? And what does this actually mean for my mix of how my organization grows? That's just around the people side. And then the other proportion would be as well, this mix of insourced and outsourced. And knowing that when we talk about mix is about people, mix is about channel, mix is about mix of evidence, but across the board in that. So Paul, long answer to your question, but these are the kind of things I think that we think about when we are thinking about the medical function in context of our overall organization as well.
A long answer, but a good answer. So please, Avashni, thank you for that. Obviously keen to hear any reflections from that, but also Denise, you get the chance to see across the spectrum of different clients that you work with, and keen to hear your perspective on this, as well as reacting to what you've just heard.
Yes, thank you. And what I've heard is fabulous so far. And I wanted to jump through the camera and the computer with each of our other panelists here. I come from the perspective of having been in medical affairs, in pharma, but also now in a role where I sit on the outsourced side. And so it was refreshing to see the pie chart have as much mix or hybrid or outsourced only. So that was music to my ears, because it's something that we believe strongly in. Listen, if you look at those papers that we're talking about, several references to McKinsey, the big vision here, the one word that doesn't go away for over a decade now is strategy. And having been in this realm for long enough for myself to see we need to evolve from a place where maybe there's one strategist in all of medical, and that's the head person that has the most strategic thinking, and everyone else is heads down operating and doing something, to where there is a breadth of people with a strategic bent towards them. And then how do you collaborate and bring all of those elements together so that you are working hand in hand, making sure those business objectives are met, like Arashi was talking about, but then allowing that collaboration to allow more time to free yourself up for, hey, if I'm not trying to operationalize things that take a lot of time. Someone said it takes a lot of time to onboard people and to train them. If I'm not focused on that because I can collaborate in other ways, outsourcing being one of them, think about that step that can be taken where we're putting a new focus on how that cross leadership across different functions in medical affairs are building that strength. They're hiring those people and then putting an emphasis towards keeping that developed and keeping that working and practicing and doing your reps and sets, Paul, like you were doing in the video, because in some ways, I do believe it's about practicing and making a shift and a change in the way you're fundamentally doing things.
Panel reactions. Denise, I thought that was great, but
yeah, I think
an audience as well. Audience.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good questions in the chat as well. So no, I think that really resonates. I think to become, it's that transformation. And, in a previous role I had as a country medical director, trying to move the medical department from that sort of more reactive, where the brains, to the sort of brain and muscle piece, did require sort of understanding actually what are they working on and what bits are the bits that we think are the value added and can make them more that sort of leaning in partner to commercial and give them the headspace to sort of drive strategy. And by the way, I've always sort of said that medical, we are part of the commercialization process, right? Commercialization is all about getting medicines to patients at scale. So we shouldn't shy away from the fact we are part of that. But yeah, exactly as you said, Denise, one of the things that, to drive that transformation was really understanding, well, where are you spending your efforts, right? And are you spending them in the right place? And actually, this is where I want you to be and not here. And, being in the UK, a lot of their time was on approving materials and codes and that kind of thing. So for me, it was a, speaking to my general manager. So again, it was a partnership, me working with the other business leaders in the business. We really wanted the medical to be reaching its full potential. So we looked at outsourcing. We thought, okay, we'll take this bit of stuff off your plate so you can focus on the bits we want you to focus on. So I think that really resonates with me. And I'm sure that is something that could be done in so many other areas as well. And to your point of Ashni around, leaning into commercial strategy and being part of those business objectives, I do think we're getting to a place now where this is the role of, say, like the commercial leads. These are the roles of medical. Now that you're getting a lot more of an overlap. So I think it's being really clear what's in that overlap and how do we lean in and make sure we're holding hands and we're challenging each other and we're getting to the right outcomes, but also the bit that's outside of the overlap. So what am I purely accountable for delivering and driving and making happen as well as your cross-functional partners? So I think being able to sort of understand that space, I think as a medical leader can just help you navigate things much more effectively.
Yeah. I would like to add something because I completely agree. And I like, first of all, Samin, your comment about being, sorry, can you hear me well?
Yeah, sure. Go for it, Sebastian.
Good. Being clear, right, about, and I'm being proud of knowing that medical, right, in its broader sense, is part of the commercialization function, right? And that goes all the way from very early on, because we have commercial pipeline work, if you will, right, from very early on, business development, all the way to the latest phase of commercialization. I think that's important because it helps define the identity better, helps integrate better, and it has nothing to do, right, with taking the pride of, what is complementary and what is different, right, from the functions, and what are some of the elements of each of the swim lanes. So that's an important point I want to highlight, because sometimes it's a little bit forgotten, and that doesn't help, right, build a strong internal connectivity, right, within the teams that need to work cross-functionally to devise strategy. And the second comment that I wanted to make, I was just reflecting a second as we were talking on strategy, right? And of course, I mean, one could say, what is strategy, or what are the different type of strategy, or what is strategic thinking, or versus what is formulating a strategy. And by no means I pretend to either lecture or try to confine us into defining. But I was just reflecting. I was recently reading a book by Michael Watkins, which is famous for the first 90 days book. That wrote a book on the 6 disciplines of strategic thinking, and I just quickly pop up in my screen, to be transparent, to remember, right, the 6 elements. Because I think there are things there, and I was discussing with one of my teams last year, that are very important for everybody to understand. What is strategy? How do you get to strategic thinking? And demystify some things, but also make it very pragmatic. So he talks about critical elements, critical disciplines, right, of strategic thinking, and talks about 6: pattern recognition, system analysis, mental agility, structured problem solving, visioning, ultimately articulating to action, and talks also about politically savvy. And of course, the book goes and he explains all what that means. But what I like about it is that how it goes from, elements about pattern recognition and what does it mean, and are our teams in medical truly exercising that, right? One thing is to think that you need to sit down and do strategic thinking. The other is, are you embedding in every single thing that you do the discipline, right? Whether it's insights from the field, MedInfo, evidence generation, you go to a congress, you do a congress debrief, there's new publications, you name it, right? All the bread and butter of medical affairs. But are our teams from the top to the down really operating with that discipline, right? Pattern recognition. Then it goes to, for example, problem solving. And what does it mean, right? Are we a function that is basically doing tasks, which of course, as I said at the beginning, things need to get done? Or are we a function, that is also seeking problems to solve, right? That are a little more enterprise minded, or will resonate better to the enterprise and not just from within our function. And the last one, this politically savvy element, I want to mention it because I think it's important, right? Strategy is not in a silo. It's not the brilliance of one person or one function. Even if you have a great potential strategic element to add to the table, do you know how to, going back to influence, right? To connect with peers, right? To know who to influence, or who you need to bring along to make it eventually real, right? And actionable. So I just wanted to, I'll stop there, but I thought of bringing this element of strategic thinking or strategy that is being very talked about. I think we need to do a better work in medical to make it a little more real and upskill our teams.
Thank you, Sebastian. I think it's true that in many ways we don't know what we don't know when it comes to strategy, and maybe we'll do that for the next webinar. We'll do a deep dive on the actual strategic elements that you have to bring in, everything from political savviness to everything else that you said. As it happens, I actually have an audience question on just this very topic prepared already. So it's great that Denise and yourself have brought this to the fore. Denise, could I ask you also, I believe you have 1 or 2 slides that you might be able to share with us at this point as well. I would love to hear what you have to say.
Sure.
I will close the poll after Denise has spoken. So you've got a couple of minutes to make sure. It's another 3-parter. So make sure you take a look at that and give us your best answers. Thank you.
Yeah, so just a couple here to kind of continue on the conversation maybe and share a little bit about what we see. Amplity is a global organization that is an outsourced organization. Everything from phase 2, we do quite a bit in the medical space from a field medical. We aid in developing medical strategy or helping companies kind of kickstart that process. We have a medical communications organization, and then all the way to commercial. So we have, and we do consider what we do as part of commercialization, Simin. So I do think it's important to know that, we are not a CRO, but we play fairly early when compounds are in trial, because at that, we believe that's the point where you need to start building your strategy. You need to start paving that path, including what does field medical look like. So I personally play very heavily throughout the world in the development of field medical strategies with clients of all sizes. So some of what I'm going to share might be a little bit more for experiences that we've seen with the small startups with one product, but we do quite a bit of work with midsize and large pharma. And I think that the interesting thing is no matter what size of company, there are real life examples where we have worked with strategic thinkers to help deploy a field medical, in particular, strategic moment of building a team that does something to help develop or help execute or implement a strategy that's the company has decided on. Sometimes we're right in there helping the company with that strategy. So we often get asked, like, well, what are some of those examples? So we thought that that might be a good idea to share something today. Large pharma considering for a product that had been on the market for a very long time, entering into a new indication that would involve an entire new set of specialists that the organization just didn't have that much experience with. And so through outsourcing with us, we added a specialized therapeutic team alongside and working with their own MSLs. And that team of MSLs was very blended and became all a voice of one to help this company launch a new therapeutic indication. The importance here was this team was we were strategically sought after to build a therapeutic expertise that just did not exist. So our MSLs did the MSL work, but they helped upskill very long-standing MSLs that didn't know that specialty group. They sat on study lead teams. They generated content that was used for the rest of the organization to help upskill the rest of the organization over time. That's one example. Another example of using outsourced field medical strategically that we've done, and we do quite a bit of, is when you're transitioning support from established products. Some clients have the mindset, and we saw it on the poll, well, we want to focus on our own people. So if the idea is own people are going to take on the new thing, but the older product that's still out there and still viable needs that support, but you can't get the head count, that's another way to utilize an outsourced team. Another example that I think is still massively underlooked in medical strategies, in particular in the US, is engaging community healthcare professionals. Through the work that we do, we're able to help define what's another kind of target for a field medical person, a field medical science liaison. And I say person because it might not be your standard MSL, but it could be other roles that are aligned to medical affairs and work alongside traditional MSLs. Two of those are precision medicine liaisons and lab science liaisons that we have helped companies pioneer. And it's about thinking broader than that standard KOL pyramid. We have to hit the top. Our MSLs only talk to them, or our MSLs only respond to unsolicited requests. There's this whole bucket we think of. It's right now we hear the term unmet medical need. That is important, and we help clients identify like where is that. But if our clients have an idea of we know where it is, we don't know how to handle it or how to get medical presence in there, that is an area that could be collaborated with alongside an outsourced company like ours. And really to efficiently expand your global footprint. We know that that's kind of dynamic, and all companies are structured differently. What sits in the US, what sits in other places, do they talk to each other? But outsourcing, especially if you sit in one country and you don't know how things work somewhere else, an outsourcing company is really a strong way to go. And these are the things that we do day in and day out to help our clients in the real world. Wanted to say, in response to kind of what's different, what's emerging in this vision. We know Med Affairs isn't just about field teams, but they often are the largest part. When field teams are at their numbers, if you will, whether it's combined, hybrid, with an internal or a shared internal MSLs plus outsourced MSLs, the numbers of people start growing. but we know that there's other components to Med Affairs too. I think the thing that, in reflection on this kind of McKinsey vision of 2023, that struck me was that collaboration and really thinking about how do you start thinking in a way. And so this kind of gets at something that we haven't said yet today, but we said it in a way that talked about budgets. Medical affairs is often budget constrained. Papers are saying that the spend has been flat over the last 5 years in Med Affairs, and that the spend has actually gone down 20%. Yet there's all of these demands on, now you have to understand how to do omni-channel and do it really well, which I don't think anyone's truly figured that out yet, but I'm aware of companies that are. You have to understand AI. Now we're saying you have to be strategic. You have to do all of these other things and yet deliver. Those require an investment, and those require, I think, the leaders, the strategists, and the leaders having business acumen as well in order to put good business cases together to go get the funds. Because I think for medical to really embrace this vision of, we're going to be leaders, we're going to be at the table, we're going to help shape what that next level strategy that's going to help us really connect with true patient need. All of these things that we're talking about now are in play. They're real. We have to do all of them. And I think collaboration, it does take more money to do all of these things, building those business cases really well so that you can go seek within your organization the kinds of funds that you need to start bolstering. Maybe I am going to outsource more field medical. Maybe I am going to purchase more technology that helps enable me, and not live in that time where we think we have to do it ourselves. I was kind of born into an organization that was really about, we're going to build it all ourselves, and we hire a lot of smart people. And what you see is they can do a lot of things, but when you start putting business objectives to it and stay focused on those business objectives, it's hard for people to then try to do everything themselves. So the world of collaboration, and I think outsourcing to good partners who can provide some level of expertise in all of these areas, that's the now. And I think, what I see is all of these companies that are starting to come to us and say, we need some help here because we don't think we have the bandwidth to build it ourselves anymore. We know we could do it if we had money and time and resources, but now we have to ask for help outside. And I think that's, by me sharing these specific examples, that was my point there. Lastly, I did want to end with a quote that is straight from that paper, but it talked about, to catalyze change and scale medical affairs, leaders at all levels will need to think about leadership differently. Successful Med Affairs leaders will advocate for greater investment, build new talent and capabilities, and embrace and improve personal leadership model.
Well, thank you so much, Denise. I feel like that was a mic drop moment at the end there with the quote, and you shared that with us just before we started. I know that our panel are very much aligned with that, and I appreciate you sharing those 5 examples with us as well. So hopefully that brings it a bit more to life. Everyone can see where indeed the outsourcing and the extra flexibility needs to come from. We've also been doing the poll in the background, so thank you to everyone who has answered that. I will be able to show the results in just 1 second. But just as I do so, those will appear on your screen. Panel, I would love to hear reactions to what Denise said in terms of what you personally have experienced, in terms of where you've seen flexibility needed or used in your own organizations, where it's succeeded or failed. Any stories you can share are of value. And then just, how do we actually make this stick? We've only got 14 minutes left of our time here. So I want us to be quite practical if we can for these final few minutes. What can we do Monday morning to actually exert the change that we need here?
Well, if I can jump in really quickly, and I think to your point about a reaction, Denise, I love what you shared, right? Those elements are really thought-provoking to get an organization to start to think about how they could manage their mix. I thought what you said was really interesting in that the demands are going up on the medical team, but the cost is coming down or the spend is coming down, right? So you've got this imbalance. And sitting on the other side where I'm evaluating the business cases that are coming to the table, the first question I'm normally asking is, what are you letting go of, right? So what are you not doing anymore? Because this is a tendency of organizations is to add to what they're doing and not look at the environment and ask, what does the environment actually need? Does it need what I did 10 years ago, or can I let go of that? And I think that for me is also a challenge to ourselves and to our medical organizations to really ask, do I need to do everything I did 10 years ago? Or am I legacy carrying everything that I did? And that is really a challenge in how we think about the spend and this increased demand, right? How would you address that, Denise? Or even Shamin and Sebastian, what are your thoughts around this legacies that we carry?
Yeah, I fully agree. I just sort of put in the comments, we've got to get better at just contracting what our new roles are. What do we think we are going to do? Why is it going to add value? And why do we want to do this instead of, not on top of, right? And therefore, putting that business case forward. I do also think that change, we talked earlier about how can we start making these changes. I do also think it's upon all of us as individual, personal sort of leadership qualities around how do you show up, right? As a medical leader, how are you going in every day? How are you showing up? How when you are invited to the table, how are you sort of influencing things so that you can kind of create that environment for success? So there are more expectations, but I think it's also strong medical leadership is around really being clear about, well, actually, if this is what we're going to be focusing on now, and this is how we're going to add value, then this piece of work here, how do we deal with that? Then that becomes a business conversation, right? You're going to have that with your business colleagues because this is about designing your business as the way you want it to operate. So it's not just about a medical decision. This is a business decision as well. So frame it as such.
Absolutely. And just to add quickly, I agree with everything. I really like, the first point you made about really asking what are you not doing, right? What are you letting go? And of course, again, going back a little bit to this strategy, I mean, it's critical, right? The ability to set priorities, have clear priorities, be able to do trade-offs. So it's perfectly aligned and it's critical, both for resources, but also for focus, even if you have endless resources, right? Maybe the one thing that I would say to start doing on Monday, just in line with everything and agreeing, one thing that I started embedding in my language a little bit the last 2-3 years with my teams, and it has gained some traction, is the following. Commercial, of course, is very good talking about ROI, right? And everything in the business, you need to see an ROI. There's nothing wrong about it, and it's a because also they need to talk about business cases, and you need to embed what's a return on investment on different things, whether it's something monetary or other things. I think that one opportunity that medical has is to embed in the business case COI, the cost of inaction, and bring a little clarity, right, about what is the the cost for the enterprise, the cost for the organization, the cost for potentially inability to scale or impact later on of inaction on certain things that perhaps are a little more difficult for medical to quantify right at that moment. Yeah. So it's not a euphemism for what cannot be quantified, but certainly it's very strong strategic thinking to understand, okay, what is the cost if I don't do these things, right? And that can go very pragmatic, right? For example, how early you have a medical field in the place for launch, just to be very clear, right? How early you have a field medical in place for a launch. What are the insights that you're not being able to bring on time to shape strategy, shape the scientific narrative, X, Y, Z? So I stop there.
I was going to say, but what you're describing is, you're talking about your business leadership hat, right? So you are a medical leader. You're there to sort of help the practice of medicine, the evidence generation, giving the tools to your MSLs or the field team to engage and drive that sort of what's needed for medicines to be successful and accelerated into practice. But the bit around, how you contract with the organization, what's the cost of not doing this? That's your business leadership hat. And I think that's the bit as well as medical leaders we need to get stronger at, is how do we just kind of show up as business leaders as well as medical leaders.
When you guys were talking, I was thinking a lot about one of my favorite quotes about strategy, which is strategy is about saying no. And I was also thinking about how it's the natural medical personality. You've probably been the people that were sitting at the front of the classroom for most of your life, and you've been saying yes, yes, yes to the teacher and to whoever else your whole life. And I joke, but it's almost part of the identity of medical, is being good at everything and being.
But Paul, where would you be if we all said no now to your webinar, right?
That's true. Hey, you don't understand. I invited 100 people. You're just
yes, okay.
You're just the gullible ones. No, I'm joking. No, very, very strong. If you look at the poll results, you can see that on that first question, what's the biggest barrier? It does actually speak a little bit towards the personality of medical. We default to tactical management because it's familiar, getting a third of the vote, and senior leaders don't yet expect medical to lead, also getting another third of the vote, roughly. What does medical need to do more of to lead effectively? Business acumen coming to the front, really, to echo all of the conversations that we've had so far. Interesting, I threw that technology one in at the last minute when I was just putting the polls in an hour before the session, and that got 0% of the vote. Really interesting. This is possibly the first session we've got to 53 minutes and the word AI has not been mentioned. Amazing. Some kind of record there, I think. What single capability would boost most medical teams' muscle tomorrow? Speaking the language of non-medical stakeholders, getting 35%. Influence, to speak to Sebastian's point earlier, and managing cross-functional disease, really pointing again to that integrated commercial and medical. So I thought that was very interesting. We are fast running out of time. I'd like to get another poll going, so I'm going to get rid of that one and start a new one right away. Panel, with the limited time, I want us to double down again on that Monday morning stuff. I also want, Denise, you to answer, you may have done it already in the chat. There was a question about the suspicion of compliance when it comes to losing control of outsourced teams. I know you've responded there, but just a quick continue on that from that as well.
We do get that question. And, companies like ours have compliance organizations as a part of our infrastructure. And they are, we have a fantastic compliance team that in some cases actually builds the compliance SOPs that the clients then adopt for themselves because they don't have any policies yet. They're so new. They're in the infancy of forming. So that compliance piece, I'm just addressing that up front, but I also want to say a few other things. It's the last thing that companies like mine would want to do is something that would cause a compliance concern that would get our sponsors in trouble. That's just a big thing that is on the table as we build ways of working with clients, as we build our contracts with clients. And so we're very well versed in that. So I think, I'm happy to invite anyone who wants to talk to me with our compliance team to understand if you think that's been a barrier. But in general, the other thing I would say that I've seen in my experience is medical in general is not used to outsourcing. Commercial organizations have done it for decades and decades. Outsourcing is still in its infancy, I think, in medical. And so what I've seen is this rise of people in their career in medical. They take on leadership roles. Someone's in their ear saying, oh, maybe you should consider outsourcing. But that person has no personal experience. And so they're automatically thinking it's a negative thing. Whereas, what's happened is companies have formed like ours. There's other ones that do this day in and day out for a living. And we want to make sure that we do it right and set our clients up for success, because really it's about your success. And so that suspicious or, someone had a bad experience like a long time ago where someone said, an MSL or someone on a team did something that someone didn't like. And I always challenge back and say, we're dealing with humans here. And that happens inside companies too. And that's the reality when we're dealing with humans working together. So as leaders, we need to make sure that we're setting the right framework that allows companies to come together and allows the connection at that point of handshake, so that we're all putting the right KPIs, measures, and how we're going to measure this, so that everyone can go off and say, hey, this was a great success. I hope that helps,
absolutely.
Paul.
Well, it does, but also, Denise, the very fact that you are here alive and well and your company is doing well, is successful, I think illustrates that you have some clients that have been able to figure this out. So it is very much possible. Right, time is fast running out. 3 minutes to go. That means I can only ask our panel for single sentence answers. And of course, I'm going to ask you a question I have asked before, but not in this context, which is, if you are now promoted, congratulations, to EVP medical or even CEO in your current companies, and you have the ability to change things for the better unilaterally in the next few days, weeks, and months in your newly found promoted career, what are you going to change here to make sure that medical scales well, to make sure that medical has that impact that you want it to have, both internally, of course, but even more importantly, perhaps externally as well? I'd like to just do a round robin. I can only give you a sentence or two each, but please do answer this. I'm going to close this poll in 5 seconds as well.
So maybe jump quickly.
Go on, question.
Two things, keeping it simple, of course, in this context. One is rethink heavily organizational design, team composition, diversity of talent was alluded, but with MDs, PharmDs, all critical backgrounds. But I think that we're not doing a good job looking at data scientists, epidemiologists, patient advocates, HUR specialists, a lot of other people that can develop the craft of medical affairs, but can bring different perspectives on how we do our work. And the second is design for adaptability and creativity. And I connect that to the topic that you said that wasn't said, artificial intelligence, and certainly, working with vendors, outsourcing. I think that it has to be a unique ability to be adaptable and creative, to add tremendous value, and then allow for a lot more, outsourcing or routine work, but add value through that. Those are two things that come to mind.
Thank you, Sebastian. Who's next?
I'll be quick, and obviously I wouldn't be doing this on day one, because if I've only just been promoted, I probably have to kind of have a day of celebration. But I would want to make sure that I'm building world-class capabilities, and then obviously there's going to be how I do that, but also really build that organizational buy-in to why you need this strong strategic medical function, and then a plan on how. You've only asked me for a sentence, but there are lots of things baked into what I would want to do if I got that job tomorrow. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But there's a lot, I think, that can be done, and it does require quite a lot of strong medical and business leadership.
Well, we will interview you, Samin, and get your manifesto for leadership from you in an expanded form in the future. So watch out for that. Avashni.
So I think the first thing for me is always understanding what are the business objectives, right? Because before I decide to scale, before I decide what I need, before I decide what competencies I need, is what are the business objectives? And that allows us then to define how we're going to go forward. So you asked me, what would I do Monday morning? Monday morning, I'd be really clear on what the business needs to achieve versus what medical needs to achieve, because medical will only be aligned to what the business has to achieve at the end of the day. So I think that would be my first thing. Okay.
Denise, we're pretty much out of time, but you have the final word, so go for it.
I'll just say investing in the people. It's important to get the right people in the right role, but it's also important to be able to look at where are people spending their time, and that includes the leadership team. Where are you spending your time? Freeing up that time by either partnering, outsourcing, delegating within the organization, and allowing the leadership team to have time to truly further develop these muscles.
Amazing. Well, guys, we have hit the hour. I don't want you to be late for your next meeting. You are in medical after all, and you very much care about that. But I do want to say a huge, huge thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Obviously, Avashni, special high five for coming in last minute. Samin, Sebastian, really, really great contributions from you. Denise, you and your team have been so good to work with and partner with on this webinar and make it happen. Really grateful for everything that you guys have put into it. So guys, keep working out, keep training, keep pumping those muscles. We're expecting to see some incredible stats going forward on your performance. Do throw into the chat window any final messages, any suggestions that you have for the future. You can see that I've got a next steps question as well if you haven't answered that already. But for now, obviously, want to say a massive thank you again. Good luck with this. Please reach out to Amplity if they could be of support to you. I recommend it entirely, and we will see you again very soon. Thank you so much, everyone.